The digital clock on the dashboard of my Honda Civic read 2:15 a.m. A light drizzle that had started in the afternoon was now reflecting the streetlights of a sleeping Los Angeles onto the wet asphalt. My body ached. This year's audit season had been a special kind of hell. As a senior associate at one of the Big Four accounting firms, the last few months had been brutal. My eyes burned and my head throbbed as if someone was hammering from the inside. Normally, I would have called my husband Mark when I was heading home this late. But my phone had died during the last client meeting, and frankly, I was too exhausted to even look for a charger. All I wanted was my soft bed, a thick comforter, and the warm embrace of my husband. I turned into the quiet, tree-lined entrance of our suburban neighborhood in Irvine, California. The security guard at the gate was dozing in his chair. I slowly navigated my car toward our house at 400 Oak Creek Lane, a minimalist-style home we'd bought with a hefty mortgage 3 years ago. The house was dark. Of course it was. Mark would be fast asleep. I clicked the remote for the garage door, which hummed open smoothly. I parked next to Mark's Ford Explorer. As I got out grabbing my heavy laptop bag, I noticed something odd. There, by the usually tidy shoe rack near the garage entrance, sat a pair of unfamiliar shoes. I had to squint in the dim light. As I got closer, I saw they were a pair of high heels. A flashy burgundy color with tacky gold straps. The heels were pencil-thin and impossibly high-party shoes, not shoes for a casual visit. My heart, which had been beating with the slow rhythm of exhaustion, suddenly began to pound. "Who's here?" I muttered, my voice raspy. My logical brain, the accountant's brain accustomed to spotting anomalies on a balance sheet, kicked into high gear. A guest, not my mother. She lived in Sensible Flats. My sister was away at college in San Diego. One of Mark's colleagues. At this hour, the headache vanished, replaced by a cold dread that spread from the nape of my neck to my toes. My gut was screaming that something was wrong. Terribly wrong. I fished the emergency key from my bag, my hand trembling slightly as I fitted into the lock of the door leading into the house. Click. The door opened. It was silent, save for the low hum of the refrigerator. I could faintly smell the lavalier diffuser I always kept on, but my suddenly hypersensitive nose picked up another scent, something sweet, cloying, and cheap. A woman's perfume. Not my subtle, clean fragrance. I slipped off my shoes without a sound, holding my breath as I tiptoed through the dark living room. I tossed my laptop bag onto the couch. My steps halted in front of the master bedroom on the first floor. The door was shut tight, but my eyes were drawn to the guest room door next to it. It was slightly ajar. Just a crack, but enough for the warm yellow glow of a nightlight to spill out. Why is someone in the guest room? And why is the AC on? I could hear the faint whir of the outdoor unit. My feet moved toward that crack of light. The closer I got, the clearer I could hear the sound of steady breathing from inside. The breathing of two people. I stood like a statue before the guest room door, my hand raised. The impulse to shove the door open warred with a paralyzing hesitation. One part of me screamed, "Chloe, open it! Bust in there right now!" But the other part, the rational side that had made me successful in my career, whispered coldly, "Be sure. Don't act rashly. See the evidence." Very slowly, I pushed the door. The hinges, which I'd oiled last week, made no sound. The gap widened, and the scene that unfolded before me shattered my world in an instant. On the bed under a half-tangled comforter, my husband Mark was sound asleep. He was shirtless, his chest rising and falling rhythmically. But he wasn't alone. Resting her head on his broad chest was a woman. Long, bleached blonde hair covered part of her face. One of her hands was wrapped possessively around my husband's waist, and Mark's hand, the same hand that stroked my hair before he left for work in the morning, was draped securely over her shoulder. They were holding each other with an intimacy and comfort that spoke of routine. I recognized her. Even with her face partially hidden, I recognized the mole on her left shoulder visible just above her thin nightgown. It was Jessica, the recently divorced woman who lived just 3 houses down. Jessica, who had been Mark's colleague at his old job before she was laid off last year. Jessica, who often came over to borrow a cup of sugar, who greeted me sweetly during my morning jogs, who always commented on how happy our marriage seemed. The name got stuck in my throat. The pain wasn't immediate. What came first was nausea. My stomach churned violently. I wanted to throw up. I wanted to scream and wake them to grab that blonde hair and drag her out to slap Mark until he came to his senses. I took a step forward. A floorboard creaked softly. Mark stirred slightly but didn't wake. He just pulled Jessica closer. That single gesture was more painful than a physical blow. It was proof that this wasn't just a moment of lust. There was comfort there. Hot, thick tears began to stream down my cheeks, but I made no sound. I clamped my left hand over my mouth. Don't be an idiot, Chloe. Don't you dare be an idiot, I whispered to myself. If you scream now, you're just the hysterical wife. They'll apologize, Mark will beg, and you'll be confused. You need leverage. With a violently shaking right hand, I pulled my phone from my pocket. Miraculously, it had 2% battery left, just enough to power on for a moment, thanks to a brief charge in the car. I opened the camera, turned off the flash, and silenced the shutter sound. I raised the phone and aimed it at them. Click. The first photo. Their faces clear in the glow of the nightlight. Click. The second. The position of their hands intertwined. Click. The third. Their clothes discarded in a heap on the floor next to the bed. Just as I took the third picture, the phone died. The screen went black. It was a sign. It was enough. The evidence was secured. What now? Wake them. No. I looked at Mark's face again. The face I had loved for the last 5 years, the face I had trusted. Suddenly, it looked foreign and repulsive. I wasn't ready to confront him. I didn't know how deep this went. I didn't know what or how much Mark had given this woman. I needed to assess my own financial situation first. As an accountant, I knew the golden rule: never confront the subject of an audit until you have all the data. I backed out of the room slowly, pulling the door closed until only the same small crack remained. I grabbed my laptop bag from the couch, put my shoes back on at the door, and locked it from the outside. Back in my car, I sat in the driver's seat, my body shaking not from the cold but from shock. For 10 minutes, I wept silently in the dark car, pounding the steering wheel until my hands ached. When the tears subsided, I wiped my eyes. I looked in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red, but my gaze was hardening into something cold and resolute. I started the car and backed out of my own driveway. I drove out of the neighborhood and found a nearby 4-hour convenience store with a large parking lot. I would sleep in the car until 5 a.m. Tomorrow morning, I would return home and the show would begin. Not their show. Mine. At 6 a.m., the sky was already bright. I pulled into the driveway again, this time intentionally tapping the horn once as the garage door opened, a signal that I'm home. The burgundy stilettos were gone from the entryway. Good. Jessica must have fled through the back door or climbed the fence at dawn. She must have been half scared to death when she woke up and saw my car wasn't there, perhaps thinking I still hadn't returned. I walked into the house, deliberately affecting a look of exhaustion, which in truth wasn't hard to fake. "Honey, I'm home," I called out. Mark appeared from the kitchen. He was wearing a white t-shirt and shorts. His hair was wet, fresh from a shower. His face was bright, adorned with that cheerful smile that used to melt my heart. Now it looked like the terrifying mask of a clown. "Hey babe, you're back." He came toward me, his arms open for a hug. I held my breath and let him embrace me. His body wash was strong, but it didn't completely mask the faint cloying scent of Jessica's cheap perfume on his skin. Or was I imagining it? No. A betrayed woman's sense of smell is never wrong. "Sorry, honey. I was so tired last night I fell asleep in my car at a rest stop. Just didn't have the energy to drive." "And my phone died," I lied. The sentence rolled off my tongue with unnerving smoothness. "Oh my God, babe, that's so dangerous. Why didn't you borrow a charger from someone I was worried sick waiting for you?" he said, his voice a convincing performance of concern. He kissed my forehead. "Liar," my mind screamed. "You weren't waiting for me. You were busy rolling around with the divorcee next door." "Yeah, I'm sorry." "Have you eaten breakfast?" I asked slowly, pulling away from his hug. I busied myself by pretending to take my laptop out of its bag. "Not yet. Was just about to make some coffee." "Want me to make you an omelet?" he offered. "You must be exhausted." He turned back toward the kitchen. As he turned, my eyes scanned the back of his neck. His t-shirt collar was slightly askew, and there, just below his left ear, was a faint red mark. It looked like he'd scrubbed at it with soap, but a trace remained. A hickey. Blood rushed to my head. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to grab the flower vase from the dining table and smash it over his head. But I held back. I am an accountant. I am calm. I am methodical. "Yes, please." "The works," I said, my voice as normal as ever. I amazed myself. I sat at the table and watched Mark expertly chop onions and peppers. "So, what time did you go to bed last night?" I asked, probing. Mark's back stiffened for less than a second before relaxing again. Early. Around 10, I think. It was boring without you here." "Really?" No visitors or anything. Mark turned around, spatula in hand. His face was a mask of serene innocence. Nope. Who would visit so late at night? Why do you ask? Oh, I thought I saw an unfamiliar car parked on the street when I was pulling in. Figured it might have been for our house, I improvised. Must have been seeing things. You're exhausted, he said with a small laugh, turning back to the stove. I stared at his back with cold eyes. You're playing with fire, Mark, and you have no idea I'm holding a canister of gasoline. That breakfast was the hardest meal of my life. I had to swallow every bite of the omelet made by the man who had just cheated on me in our own home. Each mouthful felt like sand. Mark chattered on about a project at work, going well, about wanting to get new rims for his car. I just nodded my mind, already formulating a plan. Secure evidence. Check finances. Absolutely no pregnancy. Thank God we'd been putting off having kids. I would rip them out by the roots. I have to work late tonight, I said after forcing down the last bite. Oh, I was hoping we could watch a movie at home, he replied quickly. Okay, sure. I'll try to get home early. You can pick up some pizza and beer, I said. He looked relieved. He thought he was safe. He thought his crime was perfectly concealed. He had no idea that the best accountant in his wife's firm was now auditing his life. That afternoon, around 4:30 p.m., I was watering the plants on the front porch, a weekend chore I did when I wasn't working late. Mark was in the shower. Suddenly, the front gate creaked open. Hi, Chloe, a cheerful voice called out. I turned. It was Jessica. She was wearing a form-fitting, slightly too tight athleisure outfit. A light layer of makeup and pink lipstick adorned her face, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was holding a dish covered in plastic wrap. Oh, hi, Jess, I said, forcing a polite neighborly smile. My heart was pounding furiously, but I willed my legs to stand firm. I made some mac and cheese and had way too much left over. Thought you and Mark might like some for a snack, she said, holding out the dish. I turned off the hose and walked over, looking her straight in the eye. Her eyes were bright, friendly, and innocent. She was a phenomenal actress. Not a hint of guilt in those eyes, even though less than 15 hours ago she was sleeping with my husband in my guest room. Oh, you didn't have to do that. Thank you, I said, taking the dish. What's the occasion? Oh, just bored, you know. Nothing to do, she replied with a little laugh. Her eyes darted past me, peeking into the open front door as if searching for Mark. Is Mark around? He's inside. In the shower, I answered nonchalantly. Why should I get him? Oh, no, it's fine, she said quickly, probably afraid of appearing too eager in front of me. Just tell him I said hi. Oh, right, you worked late last night, didn't you? I noticed your car was gone. It was a trap. She was confirming that I really hadn't been home last night. I gave her a wry smile. Yep. The grind is real, Jess. I was so wiped I just got a hotel room near the office. Didn't have the energy to drive all the way back. Jessica's shoulders visibly relaxed. She had taken the bait. Wow, Chloe, you work so hard, she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Don't overdo it. You know you don't want your husband to get lonely. Men sometimes look for attention elsewhere when they feel neglected. Blood rushed to the top of my head. How dare she give me marital advice? The other woman was advising me on how to keep my husband from cheating. The audacity was breathtaking. Don't you worry about that, Jess, I said, looking directly into her eyes. Mark is a loyal man. He's not the type to mess around behind my back. And even if he did, I would know. A wife's intuition is a powerful thing. You can smell a rat no matter how well it's hidden. Jessica's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. A flash of fear crossed her eyes, but she quickly covered it with an awkward laugh. Haha, so true, Chloe. Well, I should get going. Don't want what I'm cooking to burn. She turned and walked quickly back to her house. I watched her go with a murderous gaze. Enjoy that mac and cheese, I thought to myself. I took her dish inside. As I passed the kitchen trash can, I scraped the entire contents into it without hesitation. I then submerged the dish in the sink with scalding hot water and a copious amount of soap as if it were contaminated with a deadly virus. I needed more evidence. Security footage. Our gated community had cameras at every corner, but access was restricted. I couldn't request the footage without a clear reason. But wait, Mr. Henderson, who lived across the street. After someone stole the catalytic converter from his Prius last month, he'd installed his own Ring camera pointed at the street. His camera would have a perfect view of my front door. I immediately sent Mr. Henderson a text. Hi, Mr. Henderson. Sorry to bother you in the evening. Could I possibly ask for a favor? Would you mind checking your Ring footage from last night between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m.? I had an Amazon package that was supposed to be delivered, but it's missing. The driver claims he left it on the porch, and I just want to see if he actually came by. Thank you so much. A classic but plausible excuse. 15 minutes later, a reply came. Of course, Chloe. My son will be over later. I'll have him send you a Google Drive link to the file. He's the expert on these things. Perfect. That night, after Mark was sound asleep, I'd given him a glass of milk with a few drops of a natural sleep aid to make sure he wouldn't stir while I worked. I slipped out of the bedroom. I took my laptop to the dining table, working only by the light of the screen. It was time for the audit. As an accountant and the primary breadwinner, I managed most of our finances. But we had a joint account for our future, and Mark had his own checking account for his salary and personal expenses. My mistake up until now was that I had trusted him too much. I rarely checked his transaction history, respecting his privacy. A fatal error. I knew his online banking password. It was a combination of our birthdays, classic and foolish. I logged in. My heart pounded as the transaction history page loaded. As soon as it opened, I downloaded the last 6 months of statements and imported them into an Excel spreadsheet for analysis. My accountant's eyes immediately scanned for irregularities. And as expected, the patterns were clear and damning. First, there were regular cash withdrawals of $2,500 on the 25th of every month, right after his payday. The description was always just cash. Why did Mark need $2,500 cash every month? His gas and lunch expenses were already budgeted separately. Second, there were recurring transfers to an account under the name Kevin Peterson. At first, I thought it might be a work colleague, but the amounts were odd. $1,500. Last month, $1,500 the month before, and a large sum of $5,000 3 months ago. I Googled the name. Too common to be useful. But on my mobile banking app, I pretended to initiate a transfer to that account number. The full name, Kevin Peterson, appeared. Then it hit me. I remembered Jessica mentioning offhandedly at a neighborhood book club meeting that her younger brother's name was Kevin and that he was studying at UCLA. Bingo. Mark was either paying for Jessica's brother's tuition or funneling money to her through his account to avoid a direct trail. But what made my breath catch in my throat was a transaction from 3 months ago. A transfer of $15,000 to something called Ocean View Properties, LLC. I searched the name. It was the management company for the Breakers, a luxury condo building in Newport Beach. $15,000. The exact amount for a security deposit and a few months' rent on a nice condo. So they had a love nest. This house wasn't enough. For the times I wasn't away on business trips, they needed a safe place to conduct their affair. My hands clenched into fists on the keyboard. The numbers on the screen weren't just statistics. They were quantifiable proof of betrayal. Money that could have gone toward paying down our mortgage faster, money for our retirement, had been used to fund his mistress's lifestyle and rent a secret apartment. The tears were gone. All that was left was a bone-deep coldness. My respect for Mark had hit zero. My love had turned to a negative asset. I saved all the evidence screenshots Excel files in a hidden multi-password protected folder on my personal cloud drive. Just then, an email notification popped up. It was from Mr. Henderson's son, a Google Drive link to the security footage. With cold hands, I clicked it open. 4 hours of video. I fast-forwarded to 5:05 a.m. On the black and white screen, I saw our front door. A small side gate opened. A woman's figure slipped out of the house. It was Jessica. She didn't go straight home. She stood for a moment on the porch. Then Mark, my husband, appeared. They hugged on our front porch in the open. Mark gave her a long kiss on the forehead. Then Jessica scurried across the street to her own house. Mark waved like a love-struck teenager before closing the door. I slowly closed my laptop, my breath ragged. Visual evidence, financial evidence, and a witness me. I now had all the ammunition I needed. But I wouldn't detonate it now. That would be too easy for them. If I filed for divorce now, Mark would still have his job, his right to half of this house, and his share of our assets. Jessica would gladly take him in. They would live happily ever after on the ashes of my pain. No. That wasn't justice. I had to leave Mark with nothing. Zero. Negative. I had to make Jessica regret ever touching what was mine. For legal strategy, I needed a professional. Tomorrow, I would call David, my college friend, who was now a top asset dispute lawyer. Mark. Jessica. Enjoy what little time you have left in your beautiful world. Winter is coming, and I am the storm. Monday was hotter than usual in Los Angeles. During my lunch break, I didn't go to the company cafeteria. Citing an urgent meeting with a client, I drove to a quiet cafe in Beverly Hills. It was dimly lit with soft jazz playing the perfect place to discuss secrets. In a corner booth, a man in a sharp suit and glasses was already waiting. David. My college buddy, now a rather famous family and asset dispute attorney. We hadn't seen each other in years, but he'd responded immediately to my urgent text that morning. Chloe, long time no see, he greeted me warmly, but his smile faded as he saw my face. Even with thick makeup, he could tell I was a wreck. The dark circles under my eyes don't lie. Are you okay? You sounded serious on the phone. I didn't rush. I sat down, ordered a black coffee, no sugar, and took my iPad out of my bag. Without a word, I handed it to him. On the screen were the scanned copies of Mark's bank statements, the photos from the guest room, and the security footage from Mr. Henderson. David watched in silence. As a lawyer, he'd probably seen thousands of divorce cases. His expression remained professional and calm, but I saw his jaw clench when he watched the video of Mark and Jessica embracing on our porch. Son of a bitch, David muttered under his breath. He placed the iPad on the table. Mark seemed like such a good guy at your wedding. People change, David. Or maybe the mask just finally slipped, I replied coldly, taking a sip of the bitter coffee. I'm filing for divorce. But I don't want a normal divorce. David looked at me sharply, his lawyer mode kicking in. Okay. This evidence is more than enough to win a divorce case on grounds of adultery. If you had kids, you'd get full custody. You can sue for emotional distress. But when it comes to assets, California is a community property state. Any assets acquired during the marriage are split 50/50 unless you have a prenup. Do you? I shook my head. No. That's why I'm here. The house, the cars, the savings, they're all in his name or jointly owned. But my salary paid for most of it. My salary is much higher than his. If we split it 50/50, he'll get the capital to go start a new life with her. I refuse, David. I won't give him a single dime. David leaned back in the booth, tapping his fingers on the table. If you file now, the assets will be frozen and divided in half. That's the standard scenario. I don't want the standard scenario. I want him to walk out of that house with only the clothes on his back. I cut in my eyes, locked on his. Is there a legal loophole? David was silent for a long time, studying me as if gauging how far I was willing to go. Then a faint smile played on his lips, the smile of a cunning lawyer who knows how to win a war. There is, he said quietly. It's called a transmutation agreement, or a post-nuptial agreement. You can legally change the character of your property during the marriage. Mark would never sign it if he knew it was for a divorce, I countered. You don't tell him it's for a divorce, David said quickly. You frame it as an asset protection strategy. You create a scenario where Mark or you are at risk of bankruptcy or having your assets seized by the government. You convince him that the only way to protect your nest egg is to transfer everything into one person's name, yours, and execute an agreement that makes the assets untouchable by creditors or the law. My mind raced processing the strategy. It was brilliant. The pieces of the puzzle started to click into place in my head. So if he agrees to the agreement and to change all the titles to my name legally, those assets become my separate property. They're no longer community property subject to division, I concluded. Exactly, David continued. And then a week or a month later, when you file for divorce, he has no claim to those assets. He voluntarily, legally signed away his rights. I smiled. The first real smile in 24 hours. Draft it for me, David. Make it the most ironclad, indisputable document he could never challenge. I will. But Chloe, David looked at me seriously. This is going to require an Oscar-worthy performance. You have to scare him half to death. A man in a panic doesn't read the fine print. A man in a panic just wants to survive. Don't worry, I said, gathering my things. I've been rehearsing since yesterday morning. That night, I launched the first psychological attack. I came home late, deliberately looking pale and slightly disheveled. As I walked in, I ignored Mark, watching TV, threw my bag on the couch, and sat down massaging my temples with a long, heavy sigh. Sensing something was wrong, Mark turned off the TV. What's wrong, babe? You feeling sick? I looked at him, my eyes welling with tears. The performance began. Mark, I'm scared. He moved next to me on the couch and put an arm around my shoulder. His touch was repulsive, but I endured it. Scared of what? What happened? Something terrible happened at work. Something really serious, I said, my voice trembling. A major client I audited last year is involved in a huge money laundering and embezzlement case. The feds raided the office today. The entire audit team that worked on that project is being investigated. I let out a sob. Our firm's lawyers are saying there's a chance the auditors could be held liable for professional negligence. If that happens, we could be hit with a multi-million-dollar lawsuit. Mark's eyes widened. The word multi-million was an effective trigger. Mark loved money and feared poverty. So, what does that have to do with us? He asked, flustered. If I get named as a defendant, the court can freeze all my assets, Mark. And since we don't have a prenup, your assets are considered community property. That means they could seize your assets too to pay for the damages, I explained. It was a lie wrapped in enough legal jargon to sound plausible to a layman like him. Mark's face went pale. He swallowed hard. This house, my car, everything. Yes, I answered dramatically. Even your 401k. Anything acquired during our marriage could be on the line. Mark started pacing the living room, a sheen of cold sweat on his forehead. I knew what he was thinking. Not about my fate. He was thinking about the fate of his comfortable life. He was thinking about how he would keep Jessica happy if he were poor. So what do we do, Chloe? We can't just go broke because of your company's mistake. His voice was starting to take on an accusatory tone. His true colors were showing. He didn't ask if I might go to jail. He asked if we would go broke. I don't know, Mark. My head is throbbing, I said, burying my face in my hands, pretending to cry. But behind my palms, my eyes were dry and sharp, tracking his every move. There has to be a way. You're smart, Chloe. Figure something out, he urged. I slowly lifted my head, looking at him with an expression of desperation mixed with a glimmer of hope. There might be one way. David, my lawyer friend, he mentioned something. I said, feigning hesitation. What did he say? Mark asked quickly. A postnup, I whispered. He said we need to execute a transmutation agreement as soon as possible. We have to make it look like our assets aren't joint property but are legally owned by one person who is safe from the lawsuit. Even if it's complicated, as long as our assets are safe, Mark exclaimed. How do we do it? I'll have to ask David for the details. But the bottom line is we have to shield our assets so the law can't touch them. That night, Mark didn't sleep. He tossed and turned beside me. I lay with my back to him, smiling in the darkness. Fear is a much more powerful motivator than love. And right now, Mark was scared half to death. The next day, I let that fear marinate in his head. I didn't contact him until the afternoon, letting him imagine their house being foreclosed on him, living in a shabby apartment. At the dinner table, I pulled out a large manila envelope. Inside were fake draft documents David and I had prepared. It looked like a draft of the agreement. Mark, I spoke with David, I began. A hush fell over the table. Mark put down his fork. What did he say? So the biggest risk is on me since I signed the audit reports. My name is on the case files, I explained in a serious tone. David's advice is that to make our assets untouchable, if I get sued, we need to transfer the ownership of everything. Transfer to who? Your parents, Mark asked. No, that would trigger a huge gift tax and the process is too long. It has to be to a spouse, I said. This was the key. I had to invert the logic. But if it's transferred to me, it's still community property, right? Mark asked, confused. Exactly. That's why we have to do the transmutation agreement at the same time, I said, pulling the draft from the envelope. Here's the scenario. We sign an agreement today stating that our property is separate. Your property is yours, my property is mine. Got it. Mark nodded, trying to follow. The problem is, I continued, if the assets stay in your name, you're not safe either. Since we're married, creditors could still come after them. The only completely safe way, according to David, I took a deep breath and put on an expression of noble sacrifice, is to temporarily put all the assets in my name. Then, in the agreement, we state that those assets were a gift or something making them exempt from seizure. The legal language is complicated, but the point is we change the title of the house and the car to my name, and you sign a notarized document saying you owe me a debt. That way, it looks like the assets are tied up in an internal financial dispute, so external parties can't seize them. It was a tangled mess of legal nonsense that would make no sense to a real lawyer, but to a layman it sounded incredibly sophisticated. The point was just to get him to agree to the transfer of title. So, this house would be in your name, Mark asked hesitantly. Only on paper, honey. It's just to fool the auditors and the court, I said convincingly. Once the storm passes in a year or two, we can transfer it back to your name or just tear up the agreement. I took Mark's cold hand. I'm doing this to protect our future, Mark. I don't want everything we've worked so hard for to just be taken away by the government. But if you don't trust me, then we can just give up and wait for the foreclosure notice to arrive. I let go of his hand and pretended to gather the papers. Maybe it's our fate to start over from scratch. My retreat tactic panicked him. No, don't say that, Chloe. I trust you. Of course I trust you. You're my wife. The irony was thick. He trusted me when I was deceiving him, but when I had loved him sincerely, he had betrayed me. Are you sure, Mark? I'm sure. As long as our property is safe, he said firmly. Okay. Then let's go to the notary public that David recommended tomorrow and get it done. The house title transfer and the car registration change. The fees will come out of my account. The bait was taken. The hook was set. The next morning, I deliberately left for work earlier, but I left the manila envelope on the dining table. I knew Mark would read it again, or worse, consult his new spiritual advisor, Jessica. And I was right. From a tiny USB-shaped listening device I'd planted in his bag, I heard their conversation during his lunch break. Mark must have met up with Jessica. The background noise sounded like a car engine on AC running. Are you sure your wife isn't lying? Jessica's shrill voice came through. I'm sure, Jess. She was crying her eyes out last night, terrified. Her face was white as a sheet. And this embezzlement case is all over the news. It all adds up, Mark replied. The fool. He was connecting the dots himself. So you're just going to sign the house over to her? Yeah. To keep it from being seized. I'll get it back once everything is safe. There was a moment of silence. I could almost hear the gears turning in Jessica's cunning mind. Honey, Jessica's voice softened. This could actually be a good thing for us. What do you mean? Think about it. If the assets are safely in her name, they're safe from seizure, right? So later, when you two divorce, you can still demand your share. I mean, the house was bought during the marriage, so legally it's 50/50, no matter whose name is on the deed. Jessica was playing armchair lawyer. She didn't understand the concept of the transmutation agreement Mark was about to sign. She thought it was a simple change of title. That's true, Mark replied hesitantly. It's perfect, honey. Let Chloe take all the legal heat. If anything happens, her name gets dragged through the mud and you stay clean. Later, when her company's mess is sorted out or whenever we're ready, you divorce her and demand half the value of the house in the settlement. We could use that money to buy a new place in a better neighborhood. My blood boiled as I listened to the recording. How vile was this woman? She didn't just want my husband. She wanted to rob me blind. You're right, Jess, Mark agreed. You're so smart. Okay, I'll just sign it. I don't want to seem suspicious. Let her think she's winning. The whole time we'll be the ones holding the ace. Exactly. Let her be busy with the paperwork and paying the lawyer fees, Jessica laughed. I smiled bitterly at my desk, turning off the recording. Thank you, Jessica. Your greed is paving my way. You think you're coaching Mark on how to deceive me. In reality, you're pushing him off the cliff I dug for him. You have no idea that the document Mark is about to sign contains this clause. Mark the grantor hereby relinquishes, releases, and forever forfeits any and all rights, claims, or interest in said properties, acknowledging them as the sole and separate property of Chloe the grantee. Jessica had just become my best accomplice. At the notary public's office at 2 p.m., the air was cool and smelled of old paper and lime-scented air freshener. On a large wooden table lay a stack of documents prepared by David and the notary. Mark sat beside me, nervously bouncing his leg under the table. He looked tense not because he suspected me, but because he was afraid of the imaginary federal prosecutors I had invented. The notary, a serious-looking man, read through the key points of the agreement in a quick, monotonous voice, a standard tactic to make people tune out the details. And thereby the grantor agrees to the division of property and relinquishes all rights to the property located at 400 Oak Creek Lane. Mark just nodded, occasionally glancing at his watch. He wanted this to be over with quickly. Okay, Mr. and Mrs. Evans, please sign and press your thumbprint here, here, and here, the notary said, extending a heavy gold-plated pen. Mark took the pen. He glanced at the document for a moment. A breathtaking moment of silence. My heart stopped. Did he notice? Will he read Article 4, the clause about absolute forfeiture of rights? Just then, Mark's phone vibrated on the table. A message. The screen lit up. I caught a glimpse. Sender Jess. Message. Go for it, honey. Remember our plan. Mark saw the message, a faint smile touched his lips, and then he decisively pressed his thumb onto the ink pad and signed his name with a flourish. The sound of the notary's stamp thudding onto the paper was the most beautiful music to my ears. More beautiful than our wedding march. He had signed the transmutation agreement. He had signed the deed of gift, transferring the house to my name. He had signed a power of attorney that would allow me to sell his car later without his permission. All done, Mark said, putting the pen down. He let out a sigh of relief. So, we're safe now, right? The assets won't be seized. The notary gave me a subtle, meaningful glance. He knew exactly what was happening, but as a notary, his job was only to confirm the parties were signing of their own free will. Legally, these assets are now completely separate and are the sole property of Mrs. Evans. Any third party suing you, Mr. Evans, would not be able to touch these assets. The sentence was a double entendre. A third-party creditor couldn't touch them, and neither Mr. Evans could you. But Mark didn't catch the irony. Thank God, he said. He turned to me and took my hand. It's over, babe. You can relax now. I squeezed his hand back. Thank you, Mark, for making this sacrifice for us. I'll never forget today. And I truly wouldn't. The day Mark legally made himself homeless. And even thanked me for it. We left the office. The California sun was hot, but my heart was cool. One major step was complete. The assets were securely in my hands. Legally, Mark was now a tenant in my house. The car he drove was my car. Now it was time for the next phase. Destroying their spirits. I would give them the illusion of victory before I dropped the real bomb. I would let them get cocky. I pulled out my phone and texted David. Done. Signed, sealed, and delivered. I watched Mark walk to the car whistling. He looked happy. Enjoy it, honey. Enjoy the last remaining hours of your happy days. Starting tomorrow, I'm setting the stage for our final performance. And on that stage, you're no longer the leading man. You're just a prop. Wednesday. 3 days after the signing at the notary's office that changed my life, and unbeknownst to him, Mark's. That morning, I woke up early and pulled my rose gold carry-on suitcase from the top of the closet. I started packing business attire, a blazer, and toiletries. My movements were leisurely, but my eyes kept darting toward Mark, who was still lounging in bed. He was pretending to be asleep, but I knew he was awake. He was waiting for this moment. Babe, are you really leaving today? Mark asked, his voice thick with fake sleepiness as he sat up and rubbed his eyes. Yeah, honey. My flight is at 10 a.m. The VP just called. The meeting with the Hong Kong investors can't be postponed. They're getting nervous because of that embezzlement issue. I have to go and do damage control, I replied, folding a silk blouse. The lies came so easily now. The more I told them, the more real they sounded. How many days? 3. I'll be back Friday afternoon, I answered. I saw the glint of joy in his eyes that he was trying so hard to suppress. The corner of his mouth twitched. He wanted to smile but was holding it back. Sigh, the house is going to feel so empty. Especially with this rainy weather, it's perfect for cuddling. Bad acting, Mark. I know, honey. But it's for my career. It's to pay off our mortgage, I said, zipping up the suitcase. You hold down the fort, eat well, and lock the doors at night. All right, you nag. You be careful, too. Text me when you land in Hong Kong, he said. He got up and hugged me. A farewell hug. A Judas kiss. His body was warm, but his heart was ice cold. I let him kiss my cheek, mentally counting down. 3, 2, 1. I'm heading out. The taxi is waiting, I said. I wheeled my suitcase out and got into the waiting cab. Mark stood at the door, waving with a sad expression. As soon as the taxi turned the corner and our house disappeared from view, I let out a long sigh. Driver, change of destination, I told the cabbie. Not LAX. Where to, ma'am? The Sonesta Hotel, right here on the main road just outside this neighborhood. That's very close. I know, I replied calmly. The driver gave me a quizzical look, but nodded. All right, ma'am. I wasn't going to Hong Kong. I was going less than a mile away from my house. I checked into a 3-star hotel, strategically chosen for its location. In room 305, I unpacked my arsenal, my laptop, noise-canceling headphones, and snacks. At 10 a.m., the time I should have been boarding a flight, I opened my laptop and logged into the monitoring app for the hidden cameras I had secretly installed yesterday while Mark was at work. There were 3 cameras, one in the living room hidden behind a decorative wall fixture, one in the kitchen tucked between cereal boxes on top of the refrigerator, and one in the master bedroom, our sacred bedroom inside a fake smoke detector I'd stuck to the ceiling right above the bed. 3 live streaming windows popped up on my laptop screen. 4K quality crystal clear sound. I saw Mark in the living room on the phone. His face was bright and cheerful. His feet were propped up on the coffee table, something I never let him do because it was expensive glass. Yeah, babe, the coast is clear. The old ball and chain just got on her flight. Yeah, I'm sure. She left a while ago. Come over right now. I miss you like crazy. Uh-huh, bring a change of clothes. Let's have fun for the next 3 days. I put on my headphones. Mark's laughter was sharp in my ears. The old ball and chain, I muttered, mimicking him. You used to call me your angel. Now I'm the old ball and chain just because I work my ass off to pay the mortgage on this house. Fine. This old ball and chain is about to show you some magic. At 11 a.m., the doorbell rang. On the screen, I saw Mark trot to the door and open it. It was Jessica. This time, she didn't sneak in through the back. She walked in through the front door, like she owned the place, carrying a large tote bag. Honey, she squealed, jumping into his arms, her legs wrapped around his waist. They kissed right there on the doorstep in broad daylight where any neighbor could see. Freedom at last, Jessica sighed after the kiss. She walked inside and threw her bag onto the couch right on top of the silk cushions I'd bought on a business trip to Thailand. I'm starving. Should we order something or cook? Mark asked, closing and locking the door. Let's cook. I'm the ideal wife, not like that woman who just orders from DoorDash. Jessica shot back as she walked to the kitchen. My hand resting on the corner of the hotel desk tightened into a fist. Ideal wife. You probably don't even know how to turn on that new induction cooktop. And sure enough, on the kitchen camera, I watched Jessica fumbling with the buttons, confused. In the end, Mark had to turn it on for her. She just giggled flirtatiously. Oh, this thing is so complicated. I prefer a gas stove. Yeah, Chloe likes all this weird fancy stuff. Trying to act modern, Mark chimed in. They made ramen noodles, but that's not what infuriated me. After eating, Jessica began a tour of my house. She went into the master bedroom. She opened my closet. Wow, all designer clothes, Jessica muttered. Her fingers ran across my blazers. She pulled out a navy blue evening gown, my favorite, the one I wore on our 4th anniversary. Honey, this is beautiful. Can I try it on? She yelled. Try it on anything for you, Mark answered from the bathroom. I held my breath watching the screen. That woman stripped off her clothes and put on my dress. Her body was slightly fuller than mine, so the zipper on the back strained a bit. She forced it up. Then she stood in front of my vanity mirror. She picked up my bottle of Chanel No. 5, a gift from a client, and sprayed it excessively on her neck and underarms, as if it were bug spray. A $200 bottle of perfume treated like a cheap trinket. How do I look, honey? She asked as Mark came out of the bathroom. Stunning. It looks way better on you than on Chloe. She's too skinny, built like a board, Mark praised, hugging her from behind. He kissed her neck, which now smelled of my perfume. A board who pays for all these facilities, I spat at the laptop screen. The two of them tumbled onto the bed. The pristine white sheets I had just changed yesterday were instantly wrinkled. I turned off the video feed from the master bedroom. I didn't need to watch their trashy porn flick. The audio alone would be enough evidence for court. I recorded it, all the moans, the laughter, and the vulgar words that came out of their mouths. What hurt more than the sex was the pillow talk that followed. Honey, after you guys divorce, are you going to sell this house? Jessica asked. Maybe not, babe. The location is great. We could just live here. Chloe makes good money. She can buy a condo or rent an apartment. We'll take this house, Mark replied in a casual tone. I agree. I want to change the paint color, though. This gray is so depressing. I want something like pastel pink or cream, Jessica said. Good idea. We'll repaint this room later and get rid of Chloe's smell, Mark laughed. A single tear rolled down my cheek and fell onto the laptop keyboard. It hurt. It hurt so much to be betrayed by the person I had fought so hard to protect. Mark wasn't just cheating. He was planning to erase my existence from the house built with my blood, sweat, and tears. He didn't know the deed to that house was already in my name. He didn't know he had just made remodeling plans for a house that was no longer legally his. Dream big, Mark and Jessica, I whispered in a broken voice. Soon I'll be waking you up in the rudest way possible. The second day. Thursday. I passed the time in my hotel room with a whirlwind of emotions. Watching them on my laptop screen was like watching a reality show of my own broken life. Jessica was getting bolder. She started moving her personal items into the master bathroom, her toothbrush, her face, washer towel. She even shoved my toothbrush into a drawer and put hers in the cup on the counter, a symbolic act of replacement. That afternoon, they were sitting in the living room watching Netflix on the 6.5-inch TV I had bought with my year-end bonus. Hey, my brother Kevin is asking again when you're going to send this month's money. He needs to pay his tuition, Jessica asked, munching on chips crumbs falling onto the wool rug. I'll do it later, babe. After the old ball and chain gets her paycheck. I told you my funds are a little low right now because of the car repairs, Mark replied nonchalantly. Oh, come on, honey. That was probably just a story she made up to make you save money. And even if it's real, you've already transferred everything to her name. So if anything happens, she's the one who's legally on the hook, and you're safe. Your money is safe too. Just tell her you need money for some family emergency. You're good at tricking her, Jessica scoffed. Haha, that's true. Chloe is so easy to fool when it comes to money. I just have to put on a sad face and she'll clear out her savings account for me, Mark laughed proudly. My blood ran cold. My hands trembled with rage. So all those times Mark had asked for money for his parents' hospital bills, for car repairs, to help a friend's business, it was all lies, all tactics, and Jessica was the co-conspirator. I was a fool, an absolute fool. Love had clouded my accountant's logic for years. I could meticulously audit the financial statements of multinational corporations, but I had failed to audit my own husband. Enough. I didn't need any more evidence. The adultery and fraud folder on my laptop was already overflowing with videos, recordings, files, and photos. It was time to execute. I picked up my phone. I called my mother-in-law Mark's mother, a woman who adored me, a woman who perhaps because Mark often neglected her loved me more than her own son. Hello, hi Mom, it's me, I said, forcing a cheerful tone. Oh, my sweet girl, what a surprise to hear from you at this hour. Aren't you working? Her gentle voice came through the phone. My heart sank. I was about to break this old woman's heart, but it had to be done. She needed to know the ugly truth about her son. I'm on a short break. Mom, are you and Dad free tomorrow, Friday evening? I'd like to have you over for dinner at our place. I want to do a little surprise for Mark. Our 5th anniversary is next week, and I want to celebrate a bit early. Oh my goodness. Of course we're free, dear. We'd love to. We've missed you both. Is Mark doing well? Yes, Mom. He's very healthy, I replied with a double meaning. Great. I'll come over around 7 p.m. tomorrow to pick you and Dad up. I happen to have some business near your place in the afternoon. Wonderful, dear. I'll make Mark's favorite pot roast. Thank you, Mom, I said and hung up. My chest felt tight. I'm sorry, Mom. Your pot roast is about to witness your own heartbreak. Then I made one more call. To Jessica's older brother, Chris. A highly respected figure in their family, a man with a zero-tolerance policy for infidelity. A man Jessica feared. Hello. Yes, is this Chris Peterson? My name is Chloe Evans. I live at 400 Oak Creek Lane. I'm Jessica's neighbor. Oh yes, Chloe. What can I do for you? Hi, Chris, sorry to bother you. I'm having a small casual get-together at my house tomorrow evening to celebrate my anniversary. I was hoping you could join us. I'd love to formally meet you. Jessica will be there too. Oh, that's very kind of you. Yes, I should be able to make it. What time? 8 p.m. I'll text you the address, Chris. Sounds good. See you then, Chloe. All the actors were in place. The stage, my home, now a den of inequity. The stars, Mark and Jessica. The VIP audience, my in-laws and Jessica's brother. The director, me. Tomorrow night, the curtain would rise. And there would be no applause. Friday afternoon. The sky over Los Angeles was as dark and overcast as my heart. I checked out of the hotel at 5 p.m. I had rented a minivan, something spacious enough to carry several people. I picked up my in-laws from their home. My mother-in-law was dressed in her Sunday best, and my father-in-law wore a neat dress shirt. They were carrying containers of food, their faces beaming. Mark is going to be so surprised, dear. To see you home early, my mother-in-law said in the car. Yes, he will be very surprised, Mom. It's going to be a huge surprise, I replied, my eyes fixed on the road. I fought back tears as I saw her genuine smile. Mom, Dad, when we get to the house, please don't be shocked if it's a bit messy. You know how men are. With his wife away for 3 days, the place is probably a disaster. Oh, don't worry about that, dear. I'll help you clean up, she said with a laugh. We stopped to pick up Chris. He got in the car politely and greeted my in-laws. Wow, a real family outing, he remarked pleasantly. Yes, it turned into one, I replied. The conversation in the car on the way to the house was warm and cheerful. They talked about recipes, health problems, and prayers for the longevity of my marriage. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. They were praying for a marriage that was already a corpse. 8 p.m. The minivan turned into our neighborhood. My heart pounded like a drum. My hands were sweaty on the steering wheel. A notification popped up from the camera app on my phone, which was mounted on the dashboard. Motion detected in living room. While waiting at a stoplight, I glanced at it. The screen showed Mark and Jessica having a party. Not a food party, but a romance party. They were slow dancing in the living room to romantic music illuminated only by twinkling party lights I'd never seen before. Jessica was wearing a thin, sexy slip dress. Mark was shirtless, wearing only shorts. On the table was a bottle of wine, a taboo for my devoutly religious mother-in-law and Chris. It was a scene set for perfect destruction. "We're here, Mom, Dad, Chris," I said, parking the car. The house looked dark from the outside. The curtains were drawn, but I could see flashes of purple and yellow light from the party decorations peeking through the gaps. "Why is it so dark? Is Mark not home yet?" my father-in-law asked. "Oh, he's here, Dad. He's probably just relaxing. Let's go in quietly and surprise him," I suggested. We got out of the car. My mother-in-law carried her containers, and Chris held a fruit basket. I led the way with my key. We walked silently up the driveway. I could faintly hear music from inside. Ed Sheeran's Perfect, our wedding song. They were dancing to our wedding song. I stood at the front door, my hand on the knob. "Ready," I whispered to the 3 people behind me. 1, 2, 3. I put the key in the lock and turned it silently. It wasn't even locked. Careless. I pushed the door wide open. The first thing that hit us was the smell of cloying incense mixed with alcohol. The room was dark, lit only by the twinkling party lights. And there in the middle of the room on my wool rug, 2 human figures swayed slowly to the music, locked in a tight embrace. Jessica had her back to the door, her arms wrapped around Mark's neck. Mark's face was toward the door, but his eyes were closed, savoring the moment. They didn't notice the door had opened. The music was too loud. Behind me, my mother-in-law gasped. "Oh my God." Her voice wasn't loud, but in that moment it was enough to shatter the silence for us. I didn't scream. I didn't rush in. I did one simple thing. My hand found the wall next to the door and flipped the main light switch for the living room. Click. Bright white LED light instantly flooded the room. The romantic atmosphere vanished in a blink. Mark opened his eyes, blinded by the sudden glare. As his eyes adjusted, he saw me standing in the doorway. His expression shifted from ecstasy to pure terror. His eyes bulged. His mouth fell open, but no sound came out. He instinctively pushed Jessica away from him, and she stumbled forward. "Chloe?" He stammered, his voice like a trapped rat's. Jessica spun around, startled. Her face went pale when she saw me. But that paleness turned to a deathly horror when she saw the people standing behind me. There was Chris, her brother, his face red with suppressed rage. There were my in-laws, frozen like statues. The container of pot roast fell from my mother-in-law's hands. Clang. The sound of it hitting the tile floor was like a bomb exploding. The dark gravy spread across the floor like blood. My mother-in-law took a step forward, her hand trembling. "Mark. What is this?" "Stay still," my father-in-law yelled, his voice booming. Normally a quiet, patient man, he now stepped forward, pointing his cane at his son's face. "What in God's name are you doing, Mark? In my daughter-in-law's house with the neighbor." Jessica was shaking violently. She tried to cover her scantily clad body with a sofa cushion. She looked at her brother. Chris didn't say a word. He just turned his head away, disgusted by the sight of his own sister. "Get dressed, Jessica. Right now. Don't disgrace our family any more than you already have." His voice was low, trembling and ice cold. It was more terrifying than a shout. Jessica let out a sob and scurried to the bathroom to get dressed. My mother-in-law's legs gave out and she began to crumple to the floor. I quickly caught her before she hit the ground. Mom, are you okay?" I cried out. This wasn't an act. I genuinely felt for her. Mark tried to approach. "Mom, don't you touch my mother." This time it was me who screamed. My voice was sharp enough to cut through the tension. My eyes, filled with a hatred he had never seen before, stared him down. Mark froze. He saw a different Chloe. Not the submissive Chloe. Not the easily fooled Chloe. Mark pointed a trembling finger at me. "This was a trap. You didn't go to Hong Kong, did you?" I stood up straight, still supporting my mother-in-law, who was now weeping on my shoulder. I looked at Mark with a sneer. "No, Mark. I was right here. I had a front row seat to your little live stream for the past 2 days. How was it? Did you enjoy sleeping in my bed? Wearing my clothes?" Mark stumbled backward. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. You recorded everything. Yes. From the moment you walked in to you planning to kick me out and remodel this house with my money, all of it. I pulled a brown envelope from my bag. It no longer contained a draft. It held the notarized, finalized copy of the deed, and the title to the house now under my name. I threw the envelope at his chest. "Read it," I commanded coldly. Mark fumbled to catch it. He pulled out the contents, his hands shaking as he read the title of the document. Deed of Gift and Transmutation of Marital Property Agreement. "You said you wanted to protect our assets from the prosecutors, right?" I asked sarcastically. "Well, congratulations, Mark. You succeeded. These assets are now safe. Completely and absolutely safe. Because they are mine. And you," I said, my voice dropping, "you have no right to a single cent in this house, in the car, in that garage, or in the joint account I just drained this afternoon." Mark's eyes widened as he read the clauses one by one. He finally understood that he had been completely played. He finally understood that the signature he had so willingly given was his own financial death warrant. "Chloe, you tricked me," he whispered. Tears started to well up in his eyes. Not tears of remorse, but tears of fear, realizing he was now destitute. Jessica came out of the bathroom fully dressed, but with disheveled hair and swollen eyes. Chris immediately grabbed her arm roughly. "We're going home. We'll deal with this at home. I'm calling your ex-husband's parents too." "Everyone is going to know what you've done," Chris yelled. He dragged Jessica out of the house. She was wailing. "Mark, help me." But Mark couldn't help anyone. He was sinking himself. After they left, the room was silent, except for my mother-in-law's sobbing. "Mark," I said softly. He looked at me, his face a mask of devastation. "Chloe, I'm sorry. I was crazy. We can fix this right. Pack your bags," I cut him off. "What?" "Pack. Your bags. Clothes, personal documents. Put them in a suitcase. Now. You have 30 minutes. Chloe, this is my house too." "No." I pointed to the papers in his hand. "Read it again." "It's my house. And you are no longer a welcome guest. Get out tonight or I'm calling the community security and the police for adultery and trespassing." "You're being cruel, Chloe. More cruel than you dancing with your mistress on my rug while planning to take over my assets." "I don't think so," I shot back. "Pack your bags or I'll throw them on the curb for goodwill." Mark had no choice. Under the disappointed gaze of his father and the sound of his mother's weeping, he walked numbly toward the bedroom, his shoulders slumped. He looked small, weak, and pathetic. I held my mother-in-law tight. "I'm sorry, Mom. I had to do this. I can't live with a man who trampled on my self-respect anymore." She nodded and sobbed in my arms. "You're right, dear. You're right. I raised my son wrong. Let him go. He doesn't deserve you." The party Mark and Jessica had planned that night turned into the funeral for our marriage, and I, the old ball and chain, stood victorious amidst the ruins. No physical violence, no vulgar insults, just a single piece of paper and a light switch. 2 weeks after that night, the hallways of the Orange County Superior Court felt cold and sterile. People sat on benches with faces that were grim, angry, or exhausted. I sat there in a crisp white blazer, a stark contrast to my stone-cold heart. Beside me, David calmly flipped through some papers as if it were just another day at the office. Across the hall, Mark sat alone. He was a mess. His shirt was wrinkled, probably a failed attempt at ironing in whatever cheap motel he was now living in. The dark circles under his eyes were pronounced. He didn't dare look at me. He just stared at the floor, fidgeting with his trembling fingers. He had no lawyer. He apparently couldn't afford one. "Mediation was a total bust," David whispered to me. "He's still demanding a 50-over-50 split of the assets. He's claiming he was fraudulently induced into signing the agreement." I gave a faint smile. "Let him say whatever he wants to the judge. The paper doesn't lie." We were called in. Inside, the judge peered at us over his thick glasses. Mark tried to plead his case, his voice hoarse and pathetic. "Your Honor, I was deceived. My wife lied to me about her company being in crisis to make me sign away my rights to our house and car. That's our community property, Your Honor. I contributed to the mortgage payments in the early years of our marriage," Mark cried out desperately. The judge turned to me and David. "Plaintiff, your response." David stood up calmly. He pulled out the nuclear weapon. "We have the original notarized deed of gift, Your Honor." David's voice was confident and deadly. "My client has definitive proof in the form of a legally binding transmutation agreement, which the defendant signed in a conscious and sound state of mind in front of a licensed notary public. There was no element of coercion. In fact, we have security footage from the notary's office that shows the defendant smiling and looking quite happy as he signed the documents. David submitted a photo captured from the notary's security camera, the exact moment Mark, beaming after receiving Jessica's text, signed the papers. That smile had now become a fatal boomerang. Furthermore, David continued, the grounds for this divorce are not financial but are based on the defendant's repeated acts of adultery. We submit as evidence video, photos, and bank statements showing the defendant funneling funds to another woman, proving he shirked his financial duties to his wife in order to support his mistress. Mark's face went white. He stammered, but Mr. Evans, the judge, cut him off, his tone firm. You are an adult. You signed a legal document in front of a notary. In the eyes of the law, that signature is binding. You cannot invalidate a legal contract simply because you feel you were tricked without proof of physical coercion. Moreover, the evidence of your infidelity is overwhelming. Bang. The gavel tapped lightly, but the sound resonated in my chest. The petition for divorce is granted. Property rights are awarded solely to the plaintiff as per the legally executed transmutation agreement. Mark slumped in his chair, a deflated balloon. He looked at me with disbelief. Cruel, he mouthed silently. I didn't respond. I just stood up, smoothed my blazer, gave a respectful nod to the judge, and walked out without a single backward glance. Outside, the smog-filled LA air felt wonderfully fresh. I was free. My phone vibrated. A mobile banking alert. Mark had just attempted a $1.500 transaction at an electronics store using the joint credit card. Transaction declined. Of course. I had cut off all his financial access that morning. Welcome to the real world, Mark, I muttered, putting my phone in my bag. Mark's life unraveled with astonishing speed. He had no house and no car. The SUV was in my name, and I had already retrieved the keys on the night of the raid. His access to the joint account was blocked. He was forced to rent a tiny room in a cheap motel near his office, a 10 by 10-foot space with no AC, just a noisy window fan. I found this out through a friend who worked in his building's security. And of course, there was his soulmate, Jessica. A week after the verdict, Mark went to Jessica's new rental apartment. She, too, had been kicked out of her old house after the humiliation brought on by Chris and the neighborhood gossip. She now lived in a shabby little studio. Babe, I'm hungry. Let's go grab some burgers or something, Mark suggested, sitting on her thin mattress. His face was gaunt. Jessica was roughly removing her makeup in front of a cracked mirror. Burgers again. We've had that 3 days in a row. I'm sick of it. You promised you'd take me for steak. Just be patient, Jess. It's not payday yet. That bitch. Chloe froze all my cards, Mark complained. Jessica spun around, her eyes flashing. Her sweet mask had completely cracked. Mark, what kind of man are you? You don't have a single penny. You're a manager. You said you had savings. Those savings went to the rent on our Newport condo, and the money I sent your brother, Mark yelled back, his own temper flaring. And what about my brother? He needed that for tuition. Are you really going to be that calculating with your girlfriend's family? Jessica shot back. An uncomfortable silence fell. Mark lowered his head, clutching his throbbing temples. The fantasy of their romance was being stripped away by the harsh reality of poverty. Love may be blind, but an electricity bill can open your eyes. Jessica's voice was lower now, but her tone was cold. Did you really get nothing from Chloe? No house, no car, no. The judge sided with her. Damn it, I didn't get a single dollar. Jessica let out a harsh laugh. She stood up and grabbed her purse. So what, you're just going to leech off me? I'm struggling too, Mark. I'm an unemployed divorcee. I was counting on you. If you're this broke, why would I stay with you? The words hit Mark harder than a physical slap. So you were only with me for my money, he asked in disbelief. Let's be realistic, Jessica yelled. Love doesn't pay the bills. If you were rich and handsome, fine. But poor, annoying, and hounded by debt collectors. Sorry, but I'd rather find someone else. You gold-digging. Mark stood up, trying to grab her hand. Don't touch me, Jessica yanked her hand away. Get out. Get out of here. I never want to see your loser face again. Mark stood frozen at the door of Jessica's apartment, kicked out by his wife and now by his mistress. He was alone, utterly alone in the middle of sprawling Los Angeles. It started to rain and he didn't have an umbrella. He walked numbly toward a bus stop in the downpour, realizing just how warm and comfortable the home he had abandoned was the very home he had betrayed for the woman who had just kicked him out like a dog. Mark's misfortunes didn't end there. Karma worked systematically. Rumors of the affair spread. Not by me, I wasn't petty enough to post on social media. But the world is small. An HR employee at Mark's company was a distant relative of my mother-in-law. The news of the raid, which involved family members and a respected community figure like Chris, spread through the family grapevine and eventually reached the company. At Mark's company, corporate integrity was paramount. A manager with proven infidelity and asset manipulation, even in his personal life, was considered a moral liability. That afternoon, Mark was summoned to a senior executive's office. Mark, the executive, said coldly, not even offering him a seat. "We've received a report about the legal issues you're currently facing. More seriously, an internal audit found that last month you used the company credit card multiple times for non-business-related entertainment expenses." Mark's face turned ashen. It was from when he had taken Jessica on a lavish staycation before my Hong Kong trip. He had maxed out his personal cards and used the company card planning to pay it back on payday. But his paycheck was now being garnished to pay off the personal credit card debt I'd left him with. "That was a technical error, sir. I can reimburse the company," Mark stammered. "That won't be necessary. The company has a zero-tolerance policy for even the smallest fraudulent activity," the executive said, pushing a white envelope across the desk. "This is a notice of termination. Consider yourself lucky we are not pressing criminal charges. The condition is that you resign voluntarily today, and the amount will be deducted from your final severance package." At 3 p.m., Mark walked out of the building carrying a cardboard box with his personal belongings. He stood on a street in downtown LA, staring up at the skyscrapers that were once his playground. Now he was unemployed, divorced, broke, and had a black mark on his record. His phone rang. It was a debt collector from a credit card company. The bill for the card he had used to lavish gifts on Jessica was overdue, and he had no money to pay it. Across the street, he saw a red Honda Civic waiting at a traffic light. My car. He saw me in the driver's seat, laughing on the phone, probably with a client or a friend. I looked beautiful, radiant, and completely unscathed. Mark wanted to run to bang on my window, but the light turned green. My car sped away, leaving him standing on the sidewalk, choking on bus fumes. That night, in a fit of despair, Mark tried to contact Jessica again. He needed a friend, someone to lean on. Her number was blocked. His texts went undelivered. He checked her Instagram. A new photo had been posted. Jessica was having dinner at an expensive seafood restaurant. Next to her, the hand of a man wearing a tacky gold watch was visible. Caption: "Blessed and New Beginnings." Mark threw his phone against the wall of his motel room, shattering the screen. He screamed. Not tears of sadness, but of rage at his own stupidity. He had traded a diamond for a pebble, and now even the pebble had abandoned him. A month later, I was waiting for a real estate agent at a cafe. I had decided to sell the house. It held too many bad memories. I wanted a fresh start. Chloe. That voice. The voice I once loved now sounded foreign and pathetic. I turned. Mark was standing near my table. He looked miserable. He was thinner, his hair was unkempt and greasy. He was wearing a faded shirt. His shoes were dirty. "Can I sit down for a minute?" he asked hesitantly. His eyes couldn't meet mine for long. I glanced at my watch. "You have 5 minutes. I'm waiting for someone." Mark sat down. He wrung his hands on the table. "How have you been, Chloe?" "Never better," I replied curtly. "Better than I have been in the last 5 years." Mark swallowed. "Chloe, I'm ruined. I got fired from my job. Jessica left me. I'm drowning in debt. I'm delivering for DoorDash on a rented scooter just to eat." I looked at him, my expression blank. There was no pity. That emotion had been murdered by his betrayal. And what does that have to do with me? "I know I messed up. I know I was a complete idiot." Mark's voice started to tremble. Tears welled up in his eyes. "I regret it, Chloe. I swear I regret it so much. I miss you. I miss our home. I miss your cooking." He reached across the table to take my hand. I pulled it back quickly, as if avoiding something filthy. "Don't touch me," I snapped. "Chloe, please." "Give me a second chance." Mark started to sob quietly, oblivious to the stares of other patrons. "I'll get on my knees. I'll be your servant in that house. I'll do anything if I can just be with you again. I realized you were the only one who was ever real with me. Jessica, she was the devil, Chloe." I let out a long sigh. I looked him straight in the eyes. I used to see a future in those eyes. Now I only saw a dark past. "Mark, listen to me carefully," I said, my voice low but firm. "Do you miss me, or do you miss the comfort I provided? Do you miss my cooking, or do you miss the free maid who took care of your life? Do you regret hurting me, or do you regret that you're poor now?" Mark was silent. His mouth was open, but no sound came out. You didn't lose me yesterday, Mark. You lost me the moment you first thought about cheating. You lost me when you brought that woman into our bed when you planned to take my assets. It's over. I opened my wallet and took out two $50 bills. I placed them on the table. Here. Consider this a final act of charity to buy yourself a meal or pay for your scooter rental today. After this, don't you ever show your face to me again. If you come anywhere near my office or my new apartment, I will file a restraining order for stalking. Chloe, my time is up, I said coldly. Just then, the real estate agent, a sharp young woman, approached our table. Miss Evans, sorry I'm late. The sales contract is all ready for your signature. Hearing that, Mark's eyes widened. You're selling the house. I completely ignored him and smiled at the agent. It's all right. Shall we sit at that table over there? The air here feels a bit stuffy. I stood up, leaving Mark frozen in his chair, staring blankly at the $100. That was the last I ever saw of him. The man I was once so proud of was now just a stranger who had passed through my life. Los Angeles International Airport, Tom Bradley International Terminal. I was wheeling my suitcase toward the departure gate. This time, it wasn't a lie. I was really leaving. Not for Hong Kong, but for Europe. A 2-week solo trip I had always dreamed of, but had always put off because Mark complained about the hassle of visa applications or the expense. The house in Irvine had sold for a good price. With the money, I paid off the remainder of the mortgage, which wasn't much since I had been making extra payments for years. With the rest, I bought a cozy studio apartment in a high-rise downtown close to my office. And the money left over, I decided to spend it on making myself happy. I sat in the waiting lounge looking at my passport and boarding pass. It felt strange. I used to define happiness as being a wife with a handsome husband and a happy home. I tried to be perfect, worked hard, cooked well, kept the house clean, served my husband. But that perfection was fragile. Now my definition of happiness had changed. Happiness is freedom. Happiness is sleeping soundly without a shadow of a doubt. Happiness is being in complete control of my own life. My phone vibrated. It was a text from my former mother-in-law. Have a safe trip, dear. Enjoy your vacation. You deserve to be happy. Don't worry about Mark. Let him learn from his mistakes. I will always think of you as my daughter. I smiled, touched. At least from that failed marriage, I had gained another mother who genuinely loved me. I replied with a heart emoji. The boarding announcement came on. I stood up and walked toward the jet bridge. Each step felt light, as if the heavy burdens I had been carrying, the burden of being the perfect wife, the burden of doubt, the burden of betrayal, were falling away one by one. The image of Mark's face in the cafe floated into my mind, a face full of regret. Maybe one day he would get back on his feet. Maybe not. That was no longer my concern. I had finished my audit of his life. The report was an adverse opinion, and I had already closed the books. Now I was opening a new book. The pages were still blank. There was no Mark, no Jessica. Only my name, Chloe. And in this book, I am the sole author. The plane took off, piercing through the clouds. I left behind the bustling city of Los Angeles, the suburban neighborhood in Irvine, and the bitter memories of that night. Ahead of me, the sun was shining brightly. The play was over. My real life was just beginning.